Are you ready to learn the harsh truth about the most unforgiving season on the Great Plains? Ask a modern person about winter, and they'll picture a cozy home and hot tea. But where icy winds rage, nature shows no mercy. For centuries, the endless, snowy expanses and blinding blizzards seemed an insurmountable barrier, a deadly trap for any traveler, even the most prepared. Frosty winters literally encased the land in an impenetrable shell, transforming the blooming prairies into a lifeless, cold, and utterly impassable icy desert, where a single misstep meant certain death. But what if history is hiding an incredible paradox from us? While settlers and hostile tribes hid in terror from the approaching storms, for some nomadic peoples, this merciless climate became not a deadly ordeal, but an absolute shield. It was a reliable defense against any external threats, one that could not be breached by either weapons or numerical superiority. In this episode, we'll shatter the usual stereotypes about survival. Be sure to watch this video all the way to the very last second, and you'll discover the incredible secret of why the deadly winter was, paradoxically, the safest time of year for the Lakota Indians. We'll take a detailed look at their forgotten adaptation strategies and show how the bitter cold transformed from a merciless killer into their greatest ally. You won't find this in standard history textbooks, so get comfortable. We're getting started. What if I told you that everything you believed is a lie? It is commonly believed that heavy snowfall helps conceal the movements of a large group of people. In reality, the white blanket of the Great Plains became the perfect tool for detecting strangers. Any disturbance in the smooth, snowy surface created deep shadows visible from a great distance. An experienced scout could easily make out a deep furrow left by a passing detachment 10 miles from his camp. The winter sun created sharp contrasts on the endless white plain. Every indentation in the snow reflected light differently, revealing the direction of movement of any object. The wind might fill the depressions with fresh snow, but the density of disturbed snow always differed from that of the untouched snowpack. Lakota trackers used long poles to test the hardness of the snow crust in suspicious areas. This allowed them to accurately determine when a group had passed and how many people were in the party. The flat landscape of the prairies offered no opportunity to hide behind natural barriers. In the summer, tall grass could conceal a small camp or a group of scouts. In winter, any dark silhouettes against the white horizon became an easy target for observers. The Lakota positioned their lookout posts on high ground, surveying the vast snow-covered areas around the camp. Strangers could not approach the camp unnoticed, losing the element of surprise. Moving through deep snow required tremendous physical effort. An untrained person would quickly become exhausted, leaving behind an uneven, deep trail with characteristic ruts. The Lakota warriors used special wide snowshoes made of flexible branches to distribute their weight. This allowed them to glide over the surface of the snow crust, leaving only light, superficial imprints. Such tracks were quickly blown away by the wind, keeping the tribe's movements secret from potential pursuers. The snowpack changed its properties depending on the time of day and temperature. During the day, under the sun's rays, the top layer thawed, and at night it froze into a solid crust of ice. The Lakota planned their movements to take advantage of the firm night crust for a swift march. Enemies, unaware of these subtleties, often attempted to travel during the day, sinking into the loose snow. This difference in understanding nature gave the indigenous peoples a tremendous tactical advantage. Blizzards and snowstorms, common on the Great Plains, also served as reliable cover. A dense wall of falling snow completely concealed the movements of entire camps when it was necessary to change positions. The Lakota knew how to navigate in a blizzard by following the direction of the wind and the shape of the snow drifts. Under such conditions, hostile forces preferred to stop and wait out the storm in shelters. This allowed the indigenous people to maneuver freely on their territory without the risk of being detected. Constant surveillance of the vast snow-covered territories ensured the tribe's complete safety. In winter, they had no fear of sudden raids and could calmly attend to the community's internal affairs. No one could cross the Great Plains without leaving clear evidence of their presence. Do you agree with this? Please share your thoughts on this in the comments and be sure to subscribe to our channel. Are you ready for the shocking truth? In summer, the full-flowing rivers, with their swift currents and marshy banks, presented serious natural barriers. In winter, severe frosts encased these waterways in a thick layer of ice as hard as stone. The winding riverbeds instantly transformed into smooth, wide, and safe roads. Traveling along these level highways, one could move at tremendous speed, bypassing snow-covered hills and ravines. The surface of the frozen rivers often remained free of deep snowdrifts. Strong winds sweeping across the riverbeds blew away the light snow, exposing the hard, icy shell. The Lakota used long sleds that glided effortlessly across this smooth surface. Transporting heavy loads, supplies, and dismantled dwellings across the ice took several times less time. The river network became a ready-made transportation infrastructure, crisscrossing the entire region. The banks of the frozen rivers served as excellent landmarks during heavy blizzards. The straight line of the riverbed, bordered by tall trees, kept travelers from losing their way even in zero visibility. Travelers could move along the steep banks, using them as natural guide walls. The ice road always led to river confluences, where traditional winter encampments were often located. This eliminated the risk of getting lost in the endless white expanses of the prairies. In places where the wind had created small drifts, the snow acted as lubrication for the sled runners. The transition from the icy surface to a thin layer of snow made movement smooth and silent. People pulled the sleds using wide leather straps slung over their shoulders to distribute the weight evenly. The lack of friction allowed a single person to transport a load 3 times their own weight. This radically changed the logistics of the entire tribe during the winter months. Rivers also provided convenient spots for setting up temporary camps. High riverbanks reliably sheltered the camps from the biting steppe winds. Dense shrubs and trees often grew along the banks, serving as excellent fuel for heating. Frozen water was always at hand. All that was needed was to cut a small hole in the ice to access it. Traveling along the riverbed provided the tribe with everything necessary for a safe and swift journey. Using rivers as roads allowed the Lakota to unite scattered groups in a short time. Messengers could travel across the ice at top speed, transmitting information over vast distances. It was precisely this ability to turn obstacles into communication routes that made them invulnerable. Winter gave them a freedom of movement that they could only dream of during the warmer months. The tribe's safety depended directly on the speed and stealth of their movements along the icy highways. They ruled these winter roads unchallenged, leaving their enemies no chance. Do you think other peoples could have used the frozen rivers with the same efficiency? I will reveal the best-kept secret. Successful survival in harsh conditions depended entirely on the ability to preserve food supplies for many months. The summer heat quickly spoiled food, forcing the tribe to constantly search for new sources of sustenance. Winter frosts, reaching critical levels, turned the entire environment into one giant freezer. Rock-hard, frozen dried meat could be stored in such conditions until spring without losing its nutritional value. The preparation process began long before the first heavy snowfalls, as early as late autumn. The food was cut into thin, translucent strips and dried on wooden frames in the cold wind. The dried strips were ground with heavy stone hammers into a fine, uniform powder. This nutritious powder was mixed with melted bone fat and dried sour berries gathered in river valleys. The resulting mixture, known as pemmican, was tightly packed into sturdy bags made of rawhide. Freed from the constant search for food, the people could focus on making clothing and repairing equipment. Winter became a time of calm, methodical work inside warm shelters. Resources preserved by the cold were distributed strictly according to calculated rations, ensuring a steady supply of food for the entire community. This system prevented periods of starvation even during the most prolonged blizzards lasting many days. Not a single crumb of this valuable food was wasted thanks to the ideal conditions of natural freezing. Enemy units that decided to undertake a winter campaign were unable to carry such supplies with them. They were forced to expend precious energy on the daily search for meager sustenance in the snow-covered steppe. The outsiders quickly weakened from malnutrition and the bitter cold, losing their ability to conduct military operations. The Lakota, on the other hand, were in excellent physical condition, eating high-calorie pemmican every day. Being well-fed and confident about the future gave them a huge psychological and physical advantage over any opponent. Frozen food supplies also played an important role in the tribe's social life during long encampments. The exchange of food strengthened kinship ties and affirmed the status of successful gatherers within the community. Sharing meals around a warm campfire fostered a deep sense of unity and shared security. Every family knew that their supplies would last until the sun melted the icy crust of the rivers. This confidence created an atmosphere of calm in the camps that was unattainable during the hectic and unstable summer months. The ability to transform the destructive frost into a reliable guardian of life became the crowning achievement of their culture. They learned to trust winter, using its merciless temperatures to ensure their own survival. This harmony with the extreme environment allowed the tribe not only to survive, but to thrive on the Great Plains. Nature's refrigeration system worked flawlessly, requiring no effort to maintain. The cold became their faithful ally, safeguarding what was most precious, every family's daily ration. It was precisely this stable food supply that made winter the most peaceful time of year. While their enemies weakened in the cold wastelands, the Lakota remained in the comfort of their warm dwellings. Proper use of the laws of nature guaranteed them 100% survival in any conditions, even the most difficult ones. Winter ceased to be an enemy and became a reliable guardian of the entire tribe. If you were impressed by this natural strategy for preserving food supplies, be sure to like this video. The hidden truth that everyone keeps quiet about. Many mistakenly believe that severe frosts bring only weakness and general exhaustion to the body. In reality, however, temperatures dropping to -20 degrees Fahrenheit acted as a powerful cleansing filter. The bitter cold instantly neutralized all the harmful factors that poisoned the nomads' lives during the warm season. The winter air became crystal clear, free of any invisible threats lurking in the summer heat. During the warm season, stagnant water and high humidity contributed to the rapid spread of various ailments. Summer camps often suffered from contamination of drinking water sources and the decay of organic matter. In winter, these problems disappeared entirely, as all moisture was frozen solid. The frost froze out all harmful impurities, leaving only perfectly clean snow, which was melted for drinking. This perfectly clean source of hydration dramatically improved the overall well-being of all community members. Life inside the teepee was also governed by strict rules for maintaining cleanliness and order. The central fire ensured a constant circulation of dry, warm air, drawing any dampness out through the top opening. The smoke from dry firewood acted as an additional antiseptic, purifying the interior of the dwelling. Skins and rugs were regularly taken out into the frost to air out and undergo a natural deep cleaning by the cold. Such domestic hygiene was impossible in the summer, when humidity and dust penetrated everywhere. During the winter, the tribe had less contact with other groups and European traders. This natural isolation served as a reliable barrier against the intrusion of new, unknown diseases from the outside. The lack of contact meant the absence of risks, turning the winter camp into an absolutely safe quarantine zone. The people lived in their own closed, cold-protected world, where the health of every community member was safeguarded by nature itself. The snow-covered mountain passes served better than any fortress wall, shielding the Lakota from external threats. Traditional hardening practices also played a huge role in the winter life of the Plains peoples. The practice of rubbing oneself with snow after being in a hot steam tent stimulated blood circulation and strengthened the immune system. The sharp contrast in temperatures trained the blood vessels and made the body incredibly resilient to any weather changes. This physical endurance was built up over years of persistent and methodical procedures in the fresh, frosty air. Winter provided ideal conditions for such training, shaping a nation of strong and resilient people. This philosophical mindset helped them find joy in clear, frosty days and peaceful winter evenings. Winter literally put all destructive processes on hold, allowing the tribe to gather strength for the coming spring. The frost erased all the negative traces of the warm season, renewing the world to the state of a clean, white slate. This pristine, sanitary environment made winter camps the safest places on the entire continent. The cold cut off all possible risks, leaving people with only clean air and sound sleep. They breathed deeply, knowing that the frost reliably guarded their peace. Winter was their faithful healer, banishing all weakness from body and soul. Would you like to find yourself in such harsh yet crystal clear conditions? While the Lakota actively exploited the advantages of winter, Their opponents often found themselves trapped. Neighboring sedentary tribes and American military units viewed winter as a time of inevitable hibernation and survival. They locked themselves away in their fortified forts and wooden villages, trying to avoid going out into the biting wind any more than necessary. Their heavy clothing, unsuited for active movement in the cold, made any maneuvers extremely difficult. The snow-covered plains frightened them with their endlessness and lack of clear landmarks. Military equipment and supply trains quickly lost their mobility without cleared roads and solid ground. Cavalry, a formidable force in the summer months, turned into a completely helpless and sluggish burden in the winter. Soldiers were tied to their supply bases and could not stray far from them. Deep snow made it impossible to use heavy wagons carrying provisions and ammunition. The war machine ground to a halt, shackled by ice and its own cumbersome logistics. The Lakota's light, mobile units were able to maneuver through deep snow without heavy equipment. These skills allowed the warriors to make rapid forays spanning tens of miles in the depths of winter. Lakota detachments could suddenly appear at the walls of an enemy fort and just as swiftly vanish into the snowy haze. The initiative passed entirely into the hands of those who could move, while the rest remained in their shelters. The enemy remained chained to their warm stoves, losing control of vast territories. When necessary, the Lakota could carry out lightning-fast raids to seize supplies. They approached enemy encampments at night, when the vigilance of the frozen sentries was dulled to the limit. Their perfect knowledge of the terrain and the use of white camouflage cloaks made them virtually invisible against the snowy backdrop. After taking what they needed, they vanished into the night mist without engaging in protracted battles. Pursuing them in the morning frost was not only futile, but also deadly for unprepared soldiers. The enemy's inability to maneuver made winter the ideal time for holding large tribal councils. Leaders of various groups could safely gather to discuss plans for the coming spring season. No one could interfere with these important diplomatic meetings, held in remote, hidden valleys. The exchange of views and coordination of actions strengthened the political unity of the entire people. The cold served as an insurmountable barrier, protecting their political and social life from any outside interference. Locked away in their shelters, the enemies expended enormous resources simply to maintain basic warmth. Chopping wood in deep snow drained their last reserves of strength, exhausting them both physically and mentally. The Lakota, on the other hand, established their dwellings in forested river floodplains, where fuel was literally just a few steps away. The energy expenditure for daily needs among the nomads was minimal thanks to the wise choice of encampment sites. The difference in the efficiency of natural resource use was colossal and determined the victor in this winter war for survival. The enemy's winter immobility established a clear rhythm of life along the Lakota territory's borders. Spring signaled the resumption of patrols, summer brought open clashes, and winter guaranteed absolute peace. This seasonal cycle allowed the tribe to plan its economy and social life with a high degree of predictability. They awaited the first snowfalls as a signal marking the beginning of the safest and most comfortable period of the year. The snow reliably sealed the gates of enemy forts, leaving the plains to the true masters of this harsh land. The tactic of using a natural barrier proved ingenious in its extreme simplicity. While others tried to overcome the elements, the Lakota simply let them do all the work of protecting their borders. Frost and snow served as their faithful guards, requiring neither pay nor rest. This flawless strategy of immobilizing the enemy guaranteed the tribe a peaceful sleep throughout the long winter months. That is precisely why winter was rightly considered the safest and most secure time on the indigenous people's calendar. A secret that has only now been revealed. Moving an entire camp in the dead of winter would seem an impossible task to any outside observer. However, for nomadic peoples, this process had been honed to perfection by centuries of harsh practice. The engineering of their means of transportation was a triumph of minimalism and absolute functionality. Instead of heavy wheels that would get stuck in the snow, they used sliding structures perfectly suited for the white expanse. Sleds, known as travois, became the primary mode of transport capable of overcoming any snowy obstacle. The travois consisted of two long, sturdy poles crossed at the top in the shape of the letter A. This simple V-shaped frame was attached to a sturdy leather harness slung over the puller's shoulder. The free ends of the poles glided smoothly over the surface of the snow or ice, creating little resistance. A sturdy platform made of rawhide was stretched between the poles, on which the family's entire belongings were placed. The flexible design cushioned impacts on uneven terrain, keeping the fragile cargo completely safe. Snowshoes were an essential part of every adult community member's gear during winter treks. The frame of the snowshoe was carved from sturdy ash wood and laced with a complex network of thin leather straps. This elastic mesh prevented snow from sticking to the boots, easily allowing loose snowflakes to fall through the mesh. Walking in snowshoes required a specific rhythm, a gentle roll from heel to toe to conserve energy. Experienced travelers could cover dozens of miles on snowshoes in a single daylight hour without long stops. Special small sleds were also actively used to transport small but essential supplies. They were scaled-down versions of the travois, capable of carrying a day's worth of provisions. People often pulled these lightweight sleds themselves on difficult sections of the snow-covered route. This significantly lightened the load on the main platforms and sped up the column's overall progress. The use of such hand-pulled sleds made the tribe's transportation system multi-tiered and extremely flexible. Coordinating the movement of a large caravan required strict discipline and clear leadership from experienced leaders. The best scouts always went ahead, charting the optimal route and checking the safety of ice crossings. They were followed by strong men on snowshoes tamping down the trail for the heavily loaded platforms. Women and elders drove the teams, ensuring the even distribution of cargo on the platforms. This procession, lined up in a precise formation, moved like a single, well-oiled machine. The short winter day dictated its own strict rules for planning travel time. The camp broke camp before dawn to make the most of the daylight hours. Stops were made only for a quick check of the equipment and a brief rest for the people pulling the heavy sleds. By midday, the column was supposed to reach a new, pre-selected site to set up camp. Before the early twilight set in, all dwellings had to be erected and fires lit. The ability to move quickly and in an organized manner made the tribe elusive to any weather disasters. If a severe blizzard was approaching, the camp could move from an open plain to a sheltered valley in a matter of hours. This mobility was the key to survival in conditions where nature changed its mood in a matter of minutes. Their transportation technologies were perfectly suited to the challenges of the environment, requiring nothing superfluous. They glided through the winter with an ease unattainable to those who tried to conquer nature by force. Every piece of their camping gear had been tested by thousands of miles of traveled roads. Travois, sleds, and snowshoes made up the transport arsenal of the great nomads, ingenious in its simplicity. They did not merely survive on the road, they masterfully navigated space and time in harsh conditions. This flawless logistical dance on the snow allowed them to remain the true masters of the white wilderness. Could you make such a long trek across a snow-covered plain? The architecture of the Lakota winter dwelling was a perfect example of climatic adaptation. The famous conical teepees, which served as light, well-ventilated tents in the summer, turned into reliable, insulated fortresses in the winter. The structure was based on a sturdy frame of long poles tied together at the top with strong leather straps. The angle of the walls was calculated to withstand the strongest prairie winds as effectively as possible. A covering of thick, sewn-together hides was stretched over the frame, forming a smooth cone-shaped surface. A winter teepee required a double insulation system to retain the precious heat from the central fire. Inside the dwelling, along its lower section, an additional inner canopy known as an ozone was installed. This curtain was tied to the frame poles and hung down to the ground, creating a solid wall. An air gap formed between the teepee's outer covering and the inner curtain, acting as an excellent insulator. Cold air entering from below rose up through this corridor without entering the living space. To minimize heat loss, the teepee's entrance was made small and oval. The entrance was closed with a thick piece of hide, which was stretched over a willow hoop to maintain its shape. This unique door fit tightly against the edges of the opening, preventing treacherous drafts at floor level. One could only enter the dwelling by crouching low, which also prevented warm air from escaping quickly. Every detail of the structure served a single purpose: to retain as much heat as possible inside the dwelling. The lower exterior of the teepee was additionally insulated from the outside with a thick layer of snow and earth. Snow was piled onto the lower edge of the leather cover, creating a solid barrier against the icy wind. This barrier prevented cold air from blowing under the base of the frame during severe blizzards. Under the influence of internal heat and external frost, The leather covering stretched tight as a drum. The structure became so rigid that it could withstand wind gusts of colossal destructive force. The location of the entire camp played no less a role in ensuring comfort than the design of the individual dwellings. In winter, camps were always moved to deep river canyons or under the protection of dense forests. The trees acted as a natural breakwater, breaking the dense streams of frosty wind into gentle eddies. The teepees were set up close to one another, forming a tight cluster where each dwelling protected its neighbor. This layout created its own, milder and calmer microclimate within the camp. Protected by the forest and steep banks, people could go about their daily business undisturbed even during a blizzard. Small wooden drying racks for clothes and firewood storage were built near each teepee. The men crafted new equipment while the women sewed, enjoying the warmth of their perfect homes. The interior was bathed in the golden light of the campfire, creating an atmosphere of absolute comfort and safety. The cold chaos outside crashed against the thick leather walls, unable to penetrate inside. The mobility of their dwellings allowed the tribe to move on without staying tied to one place if resources began to run low. It took experienced women less than an hour to dismantle the teepee and pack it onto sleds. Upon arriving at a new location, they would just as quickly erect an entire settlement right in the middle of a snow-covered forest. The teepee of nomadic peoples is rightly considered one of the most effective mobile shelters in history. It kept them warm during the darkest and coldest months, ensuring the continuity of community life. The ingenious engineering of airflow made this dwelling a true marvel of adaptive design. The Lakota winter camp was not just a campsite, but an impregnable citadel of comfort in the middle of an icy desert. It was within these warm walls that they weathered the harsh winters, feeling completely safe. Each community member's personal gear consisted of a complex, multi-layered system of protection against extreme temperatures. The foundation of the winter wardrobe was thick clothing made from tan materials, sewn together with sinew for maximum durability. The warm layer was placed on the inside of the garments so that it fit snugly against the body and trapped warm air. The outer leather layer reliably blocked the biting wind, preventing it from blowing the warmth out of the air pockets. This dual-action principle worked flawlessly even during prolonged exposure to the open cold. The first layer of clothing always consisted of soft, finely crafted shirts and leggings that fit snugly. They did not restrict movement and provided basic thermoregulation during active physical work. Over the base layer, they wore loose-fitting capes and heavy raincoats made from the thickest winter fabrics. The loose cut of the outerwear created an additional air cushion between the layers, acting as a powerful insulator. This modular system made it easy to regulate body temperature by removing or adding layers depending on activity. Footwear required special attention, as the feet were in constant contact with icy snow. Winter moccasins were made roomy so that thick insulating insoles could be placed inside. For additional insulation, the shoes were generously stuffed with dry grass or special types of porous moss. This natural insole absorbed excess moisture and created a reliable barrier between the foot and the frozen ground. The high shafts were tightly wrapped with leather straps around the calves, preventing snow from getting inside the shoes. Headwear and wide hoods protected the most vulnerable part of the body from massive heat loss. The face was covered with wide leather scarves, leaving only the eyes exposed to observe the terrain. Breathing through the thick fabric warmed the inhaled air, protecting the lungs from frostbite while running. The hands were hidden in long, roomy mittens, sewn without separate finger compartments. This design allowed the fingers to warm each other, which was much more effective than gloves. The preparation of materials for winter clothing was a long and incredibly labor-intensive process requiring great skill. The hides were carefully cleaned with stone scrapers, softened with special compounds, and smoked for a long time over a smoky fire. Smoking made the leather resistant to moisture, preventing it from hardening after getting wet and drying out. The softness of the material ensured there were no rough creases that could chafe the skin during long journeys. Skilled craftswomen took pride in the quality of their creations, which served faithfully for several cold seasons. For additional protection against moisture, the seams on winter footwear were coated with a thick layer of insulating compound. This improvised waterproofing acted as an invisible shield when walking through wet snow during thaws. Clothing was regularly frozen outdoors to remove excess moisture that had accumulated in the pile. The dry insulating layer instantly fluffed up, restoring its unique insulating properties to their original maximum level. Proper care of the gear was no less important than the complex process of making it. Women decorated their winter clothing with intricate geometric patterns made from colorful plant-based materials. These patterns were not only pleasing to the eye, but also conveyed important information about the owner's status. However, during harsh winters, aesthetics always took a backseat to the product's practical functionality. The primary measure of a raincoat's or moccasin's quality was their ability to keep the wearer alive in 40-degree frost. Beauty was merely a pleasant addition to an absolutely perfect tool for survival on the plains. At night, heavy raincoats turned into luxurious and incredibly warm sleeping blankets inside the teepee. The family wrapped themselves in several layers, creating a barrier impervious to the cold over their sleeping area. The secrets of retaining heat were passed down from generation to generation as the people's most precious heritage. Knowing how to dress properly was the first skill taught to every young resident of the nomadic camp. Impeccable winter gear gave them absolute freedom of movement across their snow-covered and frosty territory. They were not afraid to venture beyond the warm teepees, knowing that their clothing could withstand any blizzard. Their personal armor made winter an absolutely safe and comfortable environment. The winter landscape of the Great Plains erased the familiar summer landmarks, covering the ground with a monotonous white blanket. An unprepared person would instantly lose their sense of direction in this endless ocean of snow glistening under the sun. However, experienced Lakota trackers possessed a unique system of spatial orientation that worked flawlessly under any conditions. Their internal compass was based on a deep understanding of microscopic changes in the harsh natural environment around them. Every fold in the terrain and every snow dune carried clear navigational information. The prevailing winter wind blowing from the north served as the nomad's main aid in determining direction. It formed characteristic wavy patterns on the surface of the snow crust, known as snow ripples, pointing strictly in one direction. The snow ridges functioned like millions of tiny arrows, pointing the traveler in the correct direction across the endless plain. In the event of a heavy blizzard, when visibility dropped to zero, a person could find their way simply by feeling the snow with their feet. The shape and stiffness of these snow waves unerringly led an experienced scout back to his home camp. The winter night sky was incredibly clear and served as a perfect map for experienced navigators. The position of the North Star and familiar constellations provided precise information about the cardinal directions and the time of day. Winter constellations shone particularly brightly in the frosty sky, unobscured by summer haze or clouds. Long nighttime treks across the solid snowpack were often undertaken relying solely on these celestial, unchanging landmarks. The stars were their most reliable guides, never straying from the path set by nature. Trees growing in river valleys also provided important clues to the attentive and experienced traveler. The bark on the north side of the trunks was always rougher and denser, protecting the tree from icy squalls. The crowns of large trees often leaned southward under the constant pressure of strong northern winds. The shape of snow drifts around the trunks clearly revealed the aerodynamics of air currents at that specific location. Reading these subtle botanical signs allowed for precise determination of direction, even in dense forest. Using echoes was another subtle method of navigation in conditions of limited winter visibility. A sharp cry, reflected off the canyon walls or a dense forest canopy, helped determine the distance to an obstacle. Sound traveled differently in the cold air, and a trained ear could detect the slightest changes in the acoustics of the space. This made it possible to spot a steep cliff or a narrow gorge in time while moving through thick fog. The environment was explored not only with the eyes, but with the full range of heightened human senses. In the event of severe disorientation during a fierce blizzard, the rule was to remain motionless until the storm passed. People quickly built a makeshift shelter in a snowdrift and calmly waited out the storm, conserving heat and energy. Attempts to move blindly often led to losing one's bearings and inevitable hypothermia on the open prairie. After the blizzard ended, the sky cleared, revealing reliable celestial and solar landmarks. Patience in such situations was no less an important navigational skill than the ability to read tracks. An instinctive understanding of nature allowed the Lakota to blend into the winter landscape, becoming a harmonious and integral part of it. They did not struggle against the white silence, but used its laws for their own logistical purposes. To them, the snowy wasteland was a network of familiar paths, marked by the wind, the stars, and the shadows on the snow. Their navigational skills aroused genuine amazement among the first European explorers who ventured into these harsh lands. The precision of their blind navigation seemed like true magic, though it was the result of a deep understanding of the physics of nature. Flawless spatial orientation guaranteed the tribe the ability to always find their way to a warm camp. They possessed this white map without equal, moving across it with the confidence of the true masters of the land. Winter navigation was a complex art that ensured their dominance on the Great Plains during the coldest months. No enemy could rival them in their ability to find paths where none existed. It was precisely this that made the vast snow-covered territories an absolutely safe zone for the entire nomadic people. The long months of winter encampment radically altered the rhythm of life and the social structure of nomadic society. After the summer bustle and constant movement came a time of deep tranquility and creative, measured labor. The camp, sheltered from the harsh winds in a wooded valley, transformed into an autonomous and self-sufficient closed world. People spent most of their time inside warm dwellings, repairing equipment and creating new items. This was a period of focusing on family matters and strengthening interpersonal bonds within the community. Winter was the primary time for passing on cultural heritage and traditions from the older generation to the younger. On long evenings by the central fire, the elders recounted ancient legends, historical tales, and myths of their people. The villagers listened with bated breath to stories about the origin of the world, great leaders, and the laws of the harsh natural world. These oral lessons shaped the worldview of the youth, instilling in them pride, respect for their ancestors, and courage. The warmth of the teepee and the howling wind outside created the perfect atmosphere for immersing oneself in the tribe's collective memory. The men used the winter months to painstakingly craft complex camping gear and tools. The wood was carefully dried over the hearth, trimmed, and treated with fatty compounds to maximize its flexibility. The tips were carefully sanded, and the handles were decorated with intricate, skillful carvings and colored pigments. This required concentration and time, which was sorely lacking during the active season of endless summer migrations. Winter gave them the opportunity to bring their arsenal to absolute perfection before the arrival of the long-awaited spring. During periods of warming or clear, windless weather, the camp instantly came alive, spilling its energy out onto the streets. The young people organized active competitions on the frozen riverbed, vying for agility, speed, and physical strength. These training sessions were not just for fun, but an important part of preparing future defenders of their vast land. Throwing poles into a ring, sliding across the ice, honed the accuracy and coordination necessary for future survival. Ring-a-ling laughter echoed through the frosty valley, shattering the ringing silence of the white winter stillness. A strict daily routine maintained discipline and prevented people from falling into apathy during their long isolation. Every morning began with mandatory purification rituals and prayers addressed to the spirits of the great, mighty nature. Firewood had to be gathered before sunset, and snow reserves for drinking water replenished in advance. This routine created a solid framework of security, ensuring the smooth functioning of the entire complex mechanism of the nomadic camp. Order in daily life reflected order in their minds, allowing them to maintain calm even in the most extreme weather conditions. The confined space of the winter encampments demanded a high level of social tolerance and the ability to resolve internal conflicts. The elders acted as wise peacemakers, quelling any disputes before they could escalate into hostility. Respect for personal space inside the cramped teepee was an absolute law that tolerated no violations. The ability to live in peace and harmony under conditions of isolation was the key to the survival of the entire tribe. This social harmony was just as important a resource against the cold as thick shelters or a warm fire. By the end of winter, as food supplies began to run low, the tribe eagerly awaited signs of spring. The first drops of melting water and the change in the scent of the air served as a signal of the harsh wilderness's imminent awakening. Equipment was repaired, clothing sewn, and plans for the coming season discussed in detail and approved by the council. The camp buzzed with pent-up energy, ready at any moment to break camp and begin a new cycle of nomadic travel. Winter had fulfilled its primary protective function, preserving the people and preparing them for new great achievements. The time of the winter encampments was the true foundation of Lakota culture, hidden from prying eyes by a shield of ice. During these months, they did not merely survive physically, but were reborn as a single, united nation. The cold forced them to stick together, strengthening the invisible threads connecting each person to their ancient lineage. Winter gave them safety, peace, and the opportunity to reflect on their place in this vast and harsh world. It was precisely thanks to this snowy pause that they remained the most powerful people of the Great Plains for centuries. We see that for the Lakota, winter was not a merciless trial, but a reliable and faithful protector. Perfect adaptation to the climate, ingenious domestic engineering, and a deep understanding of nature transformed the frost into an impregnable fortress. While their enemies hid in forts, the indigenous people of the plains lived in safety, warmth, and absolute harmony. The cold season gave them a tactical advantage, reliably preserved resources, and strengthened social bonds within the vast community. What do you think of this topic, and what would you like to see in future videos? Be sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on new and fascinating historical facts.